Bandwidth for First Updates Now is supported by the Blue Alliance. Are you ready for kickoff? Make TBA Game Day your go-to destination for live first events, including kickoff at thebluealliance.com/game day.
People are interested.
But you know what? If you send me an email, you'll get a response, and it will be from me.
And I really don't have any desire to.
You haven't watched the trailer at all?
No.
A lot of people haven't heard of the couch division, so
It's a comfy division to be in, though.
it's super comfy. It's almost too comfy at times.
Your response to teams who see that as a new potential issue with districts?
Yeah, that's really a two-pronged question.
Let's see if there's any damage from that fall. There was. They snapped 330. Still on their back. 6 seconds to go.
4 was the highest rank, but then as votes continue to pour in, everything kind of changed around a little bit. So we forget to go back.
First Updates Now is brought to you by AndyMark. What projects and events will you be doing to get ready for kickoff? AndyMark has the components and supplies to get you going all year. Go to andymark.com and keep your team inspired.
Hello, robot pilots. I'm Professor Elemental, noted adventurer, explorer, and rapper from jolly old England. Yeah. Dear sir, regarding your recent foray into the rap business and the scene you portray, see, I don't normally approve of war games, but he's biting is what they all say. And by Harry, they might be right. This is hip-hop, not an Elvis night. Shelve this professor impersonation. Let it end now, it's impertinent waiting.
Shut up and sit down.
Tonight on First Updates Now, Candidly Speaking, we're talking all about something that I personally need to avoid, Cheesecake. We'll take you through the history, iterations, and how it might be utilized in the 2017 game Steamworks. I'm Tyler, and joining me is always the dapper Karthik. And Karthik, I know you just watched that video with Professor Elemental. You seem very impressed by it, if I might say so myself.
Dude, that is just like not cool. That was just weird. I mean, yeah, that was effing weird.
You're not turned on or attracted to that?
Oh, dude, like that's so like over the line. Like
the first victim, not us. So
yeah,
that's good stuff.
Yeah.
You can check out Professor Elemental on YouTube. You got, I mean, all of his stuff is as good as that. So what's going on today with you, Karthik?
I'm just stunned by Professor Elemental. No, but life is good. Life is good. It's I'm enjoying watching teams try out for Steamworks and all that jazz. So tonight we got a very special guest. He is the person who came up with the term cheesecake. We're talking with Brandon Holley, mentor of the FRC 125, the Nutrons, who's been doing FRC for 17 years. He's also the event chair for the Boston District event for New England First. And in his spare time, he's a mechanical engineering design lead at Sonos Inc., where he designs wireless speakers to fill homes with music. So, Brando, you ready to fill us up with some cheesecake?
Oh, you guys know it. I mean, what better way to spend a Tuesday night in the middle of build season talking some cheesecake?
I didn't know you did so much, by the way. I thought you were a professional CD troll or something like that.
I know. I gave up my CD troll life, a little while back. I just ran out of time.
Got to do other stuff now, right?
Yeah.
All right. Well, hey, guys, before we get our main story, let's talk a little bit about First Steamworks. We had a couple of weeks to kind of digest it, get the game under our belt a little bit so far. And, well, of course, it's always going to be a little bit difficult to establish how the game's really going to turn out, right, until we've seen some competition. Brando, why don't you give us your rundown and impressions on First Steamworks?
I think just like the simplest way to say it is it's sneaky hard. It's, you look at the game animation, everyone's first impressions of the game, I think they quite quickly envision what some robots could look like. And then I think as teams are really digging into the details, they're shooting fuel, they're trying to pick gears up off the ground, they're trying to fit all that stuff into pretty tiny robots, smaller robots than most people are used to building. I think everyone's kind of finding that this game is sneaky hard. It's definitely a tough design challenge. And there's a lot of tasks that require a lot of independent mechanisms, and integrating all that together is going to be a lot harder than teams initially thought.
Yeah, I like the game, which for at first blush it was a little bit weird, but I really think it's cool that they have three very distinct challenges. The teams have to try and sort out how they're going to mesh them all together. I agree with Brando in that it's sneaky hard because each individual task, like shooting a freaking wiffle ball, is not hard, and scoring a gear on a peg is not hard, and hanging is like almost trivial to a certain degree.
Yeah.
However, this is an efficiency game, kind of like 2005 and 2011, where it doesn't matter if you can just do the task. It's about how many cycles can you get in and how quickly can you do these cycles. And so to be the best at this game or to be an elite level, you've really got to find ways to do something really simple, but do it better than everyone else and do it faster than everyone else. So it's going to come down to shaving seconds, and that's where we're going to see the real artistry in this. The team that can get an extra 5 balls in their hopper, the team that can shoot the balls a little bit faster, the team that can just drop the gear and run, as opposed to like the teams with the touch it and you own it pickups, as opposed to chasing balls around or things like that. The team that can go to the human player and have it get a load and get out of there really quickly. Like remember in 2013, that was one of the biggest separators. The best teams in the world, their human players could get 4 discs into the robot faster than other teams. All these individual things are where the challenge in the game is. And I think a lot of teams aren't good at that type of iteration. They get a game challenge and they're like, yay, I can shoot some balls, and they're done. And those teams are going to struggle because in the past, being able to do the task was enough to hit a certain level of competency. But this year, just doing it is very, very basic. It's about getting faster and faster and faster.
Well, let's dive into that a little bit too, where one of the things that comes to my mind is last year in Stronghold that we had is even lower tier teams had something to do where they could contribute to an alliance. Where do you guys see that factoring in here? Where does a low level team who can only score a couple balls or, is going to have limited capabilities for things, how can they productively fit into an alliance this year in First Steamworks?
I think go ahead, Karthik.
I would hope that like a low end team has focused on gears because every gear is important. So even if you can just do 1 or 2, that could be a rotor, that's what I hope. I agree that if they just are doing fuel, they may not contribute very much because just a couple balls when, there's going to be lots of balls scored and it takes 3 balls to get a point or 9 balls to get a point, that's where it is. But man, if a team without many resources is focusing on gears, and gears aren't that hard. It's hard to do them fast, but the gears in general aren't that hard. Man, just being able to do like consistently 2 a match, that's huge, huge, huge.
Yeah, and we've had a bunch of young teams come through our lab in the past couple of weeks, and all of them have asked that same type of question, and I've given them all the same answer, and it was just ignore fuel. Just forget about the wiffle balls. Just focus on gears, focus on climbing. If you guys can do that well and you've practiced the robot and you get done early enough, you'll be a really interesting pick for a team. One of the really interesting aspects of the game, specifically on the scoring side, is the step functions with the rotors, and that 4th rotor is going to be what eliminations is all about, and that's going to be where gears and looking for 3rd picks, you're going to be looking for gears. Maybe that's even where you see some cheesecake action going on.
Yeah, getting those 100 points in elims instead of that ranking point that's worth 100 points that's worth in elims is going to be so crucial and key.
Yeah, and the other thing is for these low resource teams is like defense. This is going to be like the most defensive mind. Like I guess 2014 was you could just hammer people on deep, but this one it's going to be ugly. Like Brando just talked about that 4th rotor, but when in the elims at an event where there's an alliance who is now has their last gear, the one that's going to get that 4th rotor, that's a freaking 140 point gear. That robot's going to get murdered. That's going to be like homicide on the street. Someone's going to come out with a baseball bat and they are just going to attack that. Well, smart alliances are.
I go back to the blocker tube in 2007. If a team had a big chain or 5 or 6 in a row going, and a team came out with that black tube, it was just swarm. Like every robot on the alliance was just trying to keep that black tube off the rack because they knew if they did, they had the match won. And it's the same type of thing.
One thing I think some teams are going to do is I think a lot of teams are not going to start up their rotors until they have to, and that way a little bit of like, oh wait, are they actually that close? So maybe because there's nothing that says you have to start spinning them up. You just got to make sure you do it before the end of the match. So get your gears in place and then start spinning stuff up right at the end.
Are we going to see a match where mistakes like that happen, though, where either the human player forgets to rotate it either on purpose and then totally forgets about it later, or just outright blanks, forgets turning on the rotors?
Dude, there are going to be so many embarrassed human players this year. Like, I can't wait to see the highlight reel of like human player F-ups, because there's going to be this is a huge spotlight to put them. I thought like in 2009 there were a couple like missed shots with like supercells that were a big deal, but this is like you're in the center of the field. You can't miss it.
Just wait till someone drops the lift, drops 2-3 gears off the side or something like that. Like it's totally going to happen, and it's going to be rough for them.
I'm waiting for the first human player to when they're climbing the ladder to fall off the spaceship or whatever the thing's called. I enjoy fails like that. So, but there's going to be some brutal stuff.
One of the things too, I can imagine is you're going to have I feel like it's going to be such a soccer mom game where you're going to have all these spectators just screaming at the pilots in the middle of the field to do something. And of course, we've all been down there, right? You can't hear a damn thing when you're down there for that. And I can just imagine, like, didn't you hear us screaming at you? Like, no,
Stop the rotor! Stop the rotor!
Why isn't he doing it? Where's Reggie White? Like just crap like that of just like they think they know the game. And like you mentioned, like the strategy, like it could behoove them to intentionally not start rotors right away to try to trick the other team. And I just imagine all these people not understanding that and just screaming at these people the whole time.
Yeah, and I think just in general, you're going to get to that point. Teams have maybe 30, 40 seconds left and they've got their third rotor going, whether they've started it or not. They know that they're not going to get another 6 gears for that fourth rotor. Like, what do they do for those last 30, 45 seconds or more? Like, they go play crazy defense. So the game is going to take on, different periods. And then, between quals and elims, it's going to change super dramatically. So it's going to be really interesting to see how it plays out. We're a week 1 team, so we're going to be going out there. And I don't really know what to expect. We'll have a game plan, but it may not work.
That's why you do a couple events, right?
Yep.
Get all out week 1. All right. Anything else to go through with Steamworks? You guys exasperated on that?
I think just overall, first did a pretty good job. There's no big open holes, and it's a super hard challenge for even really veteran teams. So good job, guys.
I got one last thing to ask, and I'll direct this at Karthik, but Brando, feel free to hop in. Is that we've been pretty harsh on 2016 themed game of Stronghold. At least I've been harsh on that. How do we feel about that now? We've seen the second year of that, and I'll personally say, like, I think First has embraced it way more, and I think it's done in a better taste this year. And it could just because I like Steamworks better. I really don't know, but I feel like it's a lot more natural this year.
My opinions on themes are kind of what it is. I think that if you take the theme away, it doesn't change this game. I think the game is awesome, so I think that much is fine. And I think themes are easy enough to ignore. So, but like I don't see the theme doing anything for the game. I mean, from a team perspective, which I'm not, like if I was on a team this year, I'd be really annoyed about having to build this giant airship and all this sort of stuff that really only serves to function with the theme, and like that kind of stuff frustrates me. But I think I agree. Like the medieval times thing last year was just so nerdy. Like you couldn't even get around that. And this one is pretty awkward too. Like I think it would be nice if they had a theme that was more inviting to people who weren't white male nerds. But if that's the demographic they want to target, that's what they want. But I really think it's kind of ironic considering they come out and pitch diversity as a strategic pillar and then go in that direction. But at the end of the day, like the game is cool, so the theme is kind of irrelevant.
Yeah, I think a lot of us, especially folks who've been doing this for a while, they just kind of look at the theme and gloss over it. They go right into the details of the game anyway. The way I kind of look at it is it's not for me. The theme wasn't put there to appease me. I'm already hooked in. Whatever it is what it is, and I just kind of move past it.
The one thing that makes me not really care that much is that there's no audience selection or any of that bull crap where it's like there's somebody gets a huge say in what this is, or even the defense selection to a certain extent. That's some things I didn't mind for that, but overall, I mean, why even have it really, right? You don't have that this year, and I think that helps out a bit.
And I will say the one thing I actually like about the theme, it's not necessarily the theme, but I do like this whole game design thing they do where the match tells a story, and I do like that it's visual for the audience, even if the story is kooky with the theme, but like, when you see big giant things spinning, that means they've got more points. That's super visual, and like even a grandma, or a grandpa.
I think you meant to say it's absolutely crackers.
No, just no. Is that going to be part of your emceeing ritual this year? Because it's not going to be part of mine.
By the way, side note: has there been something for that? Are the MCs called something this year? I haven't looked yet. I don't know.
Well, the teams aren't called alliances; they're called adventure clubs.
Yeah.
So I'm sure to get that lingo in.
I don't know what, but he's going to be called something.
Of course, right? I'm sure our lead MC Blair, I'm sure will come up with something creative for us. Okay. And by the way, guys, we will for chat, we will take some questions post show in regards to if you have more questions about the game for that. So you can either tag at First Updates Now with a question for that, or PM us that, and we'll get to that at the end of the show or in our post show as well too. But let's move on here. Our main story this evening is on cheesecake. That's hopefully what you tuned in for, and yes, that delicious dessert that if you don't like, you can simply just go back, live under your own proverbial rock with the rest of the hippies for, because who doesn't like cheesecake, right? I sure tell do. You can tell by me. But in FRC. Cheesecake does ring a bit of a different tune, and what better person to bring in than Brando to tell us about what it means. So before we kind of go back over a decade and look at the history of Cheesecake, and we kind of walk through some of the different games for it and kind of explore like how it's evolved and where it's going in the next years. Brando, do you mind kind of just giving us a little bit of a description of what Cheesecake is and kind of how that description came to light?
Yeah, sure. So Cheesecake has a really it's a pretty funny story for our team. It has a really specific starting point, which, it's not something that kind of grew over time. In 2011, our team went down to the Bayou Regional in New Orleans, which was a lot of fun. And, we all remember 2011 Minibot year. Basically, cheesecaking, as it's known now, was part of the game. First encouraged teams to cheesecake each other, and you mix mini bots around, and there was even an award named after it, or for it. And our team had a pretty damn good mini bot. So I think it was a week 2 event, I think it was a week 2, and we went down to Bayou. We showed up with our mini bot, and we realized our mini bot was significantly faster than anybody else at the event, and we had multiple of them. They were affectionately named Candy and Raven. The mini bots. I'll let you guys figure out why.
Yeah, I was gonna say they got it. Yeah, nice pull there, huh?
And so anyway, we had our mini bots, and we had a second deployer ready, and so we knew going in, and once we realized that our mini bot was that much faster than everyone, that we needed to find a third pick, especially as we were doing well through the qualifications, a third robot, and we started looking around, and we didn't want teams. We wanted to talk to each other while looking at the robot, but we didn't want teams to know exactly what we were talking about as far as taking this extra deployer we had with the minibot on it and putting it on that robot. So we were it was late at night. I think it was after Thursday, after the practice day. And we decided to just coin the term. And a kid on our team was just plowing through a chunk of cheesecake. I don't even know where he got it from. I think it was a bakery next door. And we said, all right, we need a code name. We're going to call it Cheesecake. And it just stuck. And I think what we really hit on there was just finding a singular word to describe an entire act of, souping up another team and having them, adjust their strategy and fit with what we were trying to do. And just coming up with just that single term that happened to be Cheesecake, it just made describing the whole process easier. And we went from there. So we ended up picking a team. We cheesecaked them. I think they got the mini bot off once or twice. There were some issues with that. But anyway, I mean, that's where Cheesecake came from. And once we had that term locked in our vocabulary, we just kind of kept it there, and we've used it ever since. And forget when exactly it spilled into public domain, but we have, it's really good to have a universal term, even if it's kind of crazy.
Thanks for not like patenting it or something like that. It's nice that it's in public domain.
Oh yeah, totally. You guys, if you want to market it, it's all you. I think even the Vex stickers this year in the kit have like a cheesecake reference in them, so it's awesome. It's like we've come.
Karthik, is that true?
Maybe.
Unconfirmed. They'll be on the next show. Yes. So, all right. Well, so by the way, Fun Nation, if you are watching live, feel free to chime in with some of the cheesecakes that you remember from the past, because we want to hear about them. Because we're going to bring up some of them, but we don't know all of them for that. But before we get into it, Brando, I got to ask you a question. Where did this picture come from, by the way? Who created this picture that we have? Because that is a sexy picture right there. I mean, as the fat kid who sees cheesecake and then something sexy on top of it, I got to have some of that.
You are looking good, Brandon.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. We have our fun kids on the team that, will take any opportunity to Photoshop us onto anything. And I made the mistake of laying down on one of the practice scoring platforms in 2015 at one of the Rhode Island district event. And someone snapped a picture of it, and it was a perfect like white bottom. So they like easily photoshopped it out, and now I lay on all sorts of things, cheesecake in particular.
What are some of the other things that you have been laid on?
Oh God, I can't even remember. Hot dogs.
Food-based products. Apparently.
Yeah, a lot of food-based items.
That's awesome. All right, well, so Karthik, you did a bit of research going into this, and a lot of people, Brando talked about cheesecake being kind of a 2011 thing, but cheesecake goes back further than that. It might not have that term, but that spirit or that concept goes back quite a ways. So why don't you kind of take us through some of these years? How far back are we going here?
Well, I think we're going to go back to 2005 and to the Waterloo Regional, which kind of seems like it was the place where cheesecake kind of was born. And there was a unique set of circumstances at the early Waterloo Regionals. So there was two things. One, the events were always really tiny. So like, somewhere like 24 to 30 teams. And also early on, there would be a couple really good teams and the rest of the event teams would suck. So in terms of getting a robot that was useful in the third round, it was difficult. So, but on the flip side is like the event would crater. It would just, it'd fall off a cliff. So you would need to get something out of your third robot. And so a lot of teams, 2005, 6, 7, 8, 9, really like the 2 offense plus 1 defense strategy. So in 2005, 1305 was the number 1 seed, and they picked Team 68, Trucktown. And this was pre-Serpentine, so they got 1241 in the second round. And they didn't need any more scoring. They were going to win the event. And so but they wanted some defense. So they got 1241 to chop their arm off, and they replaced their arm with a vise. And that was like the first real incident, as far as I can remember, of Cheesecake. And they were just a defensive robot. And that almost became a tradition at the Waterloo Regional going forward. If you wanted to win that regional, you had to be, like the top 2 teams were looking for a team to play defense. And you had to really be willing to say, hey guys, if you pick us, you can cut the top of our robot off and go with whatever. 2006, 1114, and 1503. We talked to this one team. They're not a team anymore. I think it was 1282. And we said, hey guys, if you're available in the second round, we'll pick you, but you have to agree that you're going to take your shooter off. And they were like, there was a little bit of a debate, and they were like, okay, yeah, we'll do it. And so we then took their shooter off, and we got 50 pounds off their robot. We needed to replace that 50 pounds with some weight so they could play effective defense. And we didn't have 50 pounds of stuff lying around. So we went to the weight room at the University of Waterloo and grabbed a dumbbell, and we strapped a dumbbell to that robot.
You stole a dumbbell?
We borrowed a dumbbell. We returned it afterwards. Hey, dude, if there's one thing I'm not going to do is ever steal from a weight room. Have you seen the guys who work there? That would not be a good idea.
Things up, put them down, yes.
Yeah. And so, I remember Tristan Lawle was the lead inspector that weekend, and we had a big debate with him over whether the dumbbell was secured properly, whether zip ties were sufficed, whether we could Velcro it. It was this crazy sort of thing. And that was the beginning of defensive cheesecake, which was the main method of cheesecake in the early era of what was going on. Teams would, take off a shooter, get rid of weight up high, and replace it with weight down low.
And remember, like we couldn't even shoot things until 2006. Like, so, you know, the idea of blockers and all that stuff, that wasn't even an option because we didn't have that type of game until 2006.
Yeah.
And I remember specifically in 2006, even the auto defensive cheesecake kind of started popping up. I remember in the Newton division, I forget what team it was, but playing against 25, who came in historically, they're undefeated going into Newton. They made it through Newton and onward, but they had a killer auto, and if they got to the bottom of that ramp, they would unload, all 10 balls, 30 points. So teams just started weighing robots down, take shooters off, put weight in the bottom, and just drive them as fast as you could and as hard as you could at where 25 was going. And it became kind of this chess match, who would go first. And, teams would set a delay so that the defensive team would whiz by. And that was all Cheesecake too.
Yeah, the Cheesecake code was a big thing. And we'll talk about that a little bit more, but it was in 2007, it was the same thing, like who was willing to take their ramps off and just be able to play defense to get into a more compact space. And,
who was one of the zip tie the robots together? Yeah.
Yeah, that was a thing that 111 did, where that year you got a 30-point bonus at the end of the match. One robot was 12 inches off the ground and touching another robot. So 111's two partners both couldn't really do much. They somehow convinced them. I use the word convinced.
I was there, and I don't know how the hell that happened.
But they basically stacked the two robots to start the match, which was legal, and then they zipped together. And so it was an instant 30 points. So that was...
And literally told them, don't move the whole match.
Yeah.
So literally still did the whole match while 111 won.
In 2008, there was the virtual cheesecake that Brandon was talking about. A lot of people would put code into robots just to make sure they could cross a couple lines in auto. That year there were 4 lines situated on the field, and the field was basically like a NASCAR track. And each time you crossed the line in auto, you got points for it. I think it was 4 points per line. And so you would if you just drove straight, you would get 4 points. But if you just kind of, angled the team, you could possibly get 8 points with them. So that was a thing. Also in 2008, the best offensive robots, they were very hard to stop because defense was very difficult to play in that game, especially with the rules. So at the maybe it was Greater Toronto Regional, I think we were playing against Team 188. They took their partner and they basically added a bunch of 2x4s and all these weird contraptions to help them pin a ball against the wall, which wasn't exactly legal, but if you did it, it would only be a yellow card, and so you could get away with it once.
Yeah, you get away with it once at least, then, right?
Yeah, First has had some dumb rules like that, but that was a thing. 2009. Not big for Cheesecake. That game barely even happened. I pretend that year didn't exist. In 2010, my favorite Cheesecake, again, Waterloo, this is Team 1219. So 469 had unveiled this beautiful robot to have balls roll down it. And then this team, they took a bunch of pizza boxes and tried to turn their robot into a clone of 469. It was the most ghetto hack thing of used.
Do you know what team that was?
That was Team 1219. And basically, they were trying to do the 469 ramp thing, and it was just not good. And I guess also teams did some cheesecake trampolines that year, where you would just basically take surgical tubing and attach it to a frame, and you'd stick it on a robot, and you'd have that robot sit underneath the ball release. They could then bounce balls to the other side of the field. So
that's exactly what Wings of Fire did essentially that year. There wasn't, I don't think they cheesecaked themselves, but that they actually would climb the pole, and they just had a trampoline, I think, on their robot that would just deflect off. It was like a lower end version of what 469 was.
Yeah, we did the same thing, and it was hard to duplicate that functionality that 469 did. It's funny that a team tried to do it out of pizza boxes. We spent our entire season trying to do that and failing epically. So, kudos.
That 469 bot was a work of art. So
did that pizza bot work, by the way? Was it successful? No, I'm that would be one of the most hilarious things ever. Even if it did 1 or 2 of those balls,
I remember the inspectors were all looking at this thing to make sure it wasn't violating any rules. And then I think one of the inspectors goes, and like there was a delay because they were on the 8th seed and they were playing us in the first match. There was this delay to start the match. And one of the inspectors or refs are just like, can we just start the match? That stupid thing's not even going to work, was the line. And I was like, can't argue with that. Like,
it's not the first or last time pizza boxes will go on a robot, I'm sure.
No. Well, in 2011, again, Brando talked about the mini-bot ramps and the mini-bots. And, like at Champs that year, 11-14, our partner was 294, a team who's had won World Champs the year before. Great guys. And like they, their mini-bot was okay, but we had a faster mini-bot. We said, "Go guys, we built a mini-bot deployer. Can you make a flat surface on your robot at X height?" And they were like, "Yeah." And so then we put a deployer, everything on their robot. That was really cool. In 2011, again, Waterloo Regional, which is where Cheesecake happens, we cheesecake the team to be a defense robot. But instead of using pizza boxes, we did the very Canadian thing and used Tim Hortons boxes. So, that was part of it. Sorry, Brandon.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think 2011, it was a really big turning point. I mean, up to that point, teams really, there was definitely plenty of cheesecaking going on. But 2011, I mean, it being kind of fundamentally part of the game, it really changed a lot of stuff. And I remember one specific instance up here in New England. Team 40 came to the Connecticut Regional that year, and they weren't participating there. And I think they had like 4 or 5 of their own mini bots, which they were, world-class mini bots. They were pretty fast, and they just started handing them out to people. And that had a massive effect on eliminations because they basically picked who won by handing out their fast mini bots to them. I mean, they weren't even at the competition. And then
so they couldn't even get the award then, huh?
Nope, they weren't even eligible for the award. I mean, they would have won it handily had they been eligible for it.
Oh, one thing to mention too, since we do have a lot of people coming in from the Twitch Creative because we're being featured on there right now, just want to explain, if you don't know what's going on, well, first off, good luck. But second off, this is for First Robotics, which is a high school-based organization. We're talking the history of Cheesecake, which is essentially modifying your either alliance partners or the people that you play with. You're actually modifying their robot into something else, which is a interesting thing that's been done through the years. And if you're not familiar with what First Robotics is, if you go to YouTube and type in First Robotics, you'll be able to find some of the game animation videos. But essentially, this is a high school robotics organization.
Yeah, and like the 2011, like what Team 40 did that year, man, it sent waves because like that did not go over well. There were a lot of teams who felt targeted because they felt that 40 was helping everyone that they were playing against. And, I don't want to get into it, but man, there were some teams who were pissed. And like that's when Cheesecake, because like, I mean, Cheesecake's always irked people, especially when you're cheesecaking the 24th best team at the event, because it's like, especially these small events, a team that's terrible and has done nothing ends up winning the event. And they're basically winning the event.
Isn't that every regional, though, every year?
It's different, though, Tyler, because in this case, they're being chosen because they are willing to let their robot get ripped apart.
Okay.
And that's the difference. Yeah, there's always garbage teams that win events because of Serpentine Draft. However, this time it takes a team who's willing to say, hey, what we built for 6 weeks, you can rip that off. We're okay with that being ripped off to win the event. And some teams are like some people look at that and be like, wow, that team really wants to win. That's amazing. That's kind of my feeling on it. But other people are like, oh, that team's selling out and they're being bullied and whatever, And one of the things I want to talk about, I might as well start talking about it now. I think there are two forms of cheesecake. There is ethical cheesecake, consensual cheesecake, which when you talk to a team and say, hey, we're going to pick you, but, are you willing to do this, this, and this? And if they say, no, we're not willing to do that, be like, okay, well, that's what we're looking for, so this isn't going to happen. Or if they say yes, then you pick them. Non-consensual cheesecake, which is not cool, is when a team picks a team and says, hey, you're on our alliance, we're ripping that stuff off. Or even worse, in qualification rounds, when a team goes to a team and says, hey, get that off your robot. And like, this team's still trying to play. They're still trying to do what they're doing. And so I think there are some teams out there who are guilty of being way too aggressive with what they do in Cheesecake, and they push teams around and whatever for the and that's where Cheesecake gets a bad rap. And that's where a lot of people get upset about it and why people want to have rules against it and stuff. Well, there's other teams where it's like Cheesecake becomes more of a partnership, and there's working together, and there's learning, and there's
you have to be tactful in it, right? You can't. Like, yeah.
We've done things where we've Cheesecake teams, and then we said, okay, at your next event, we're going to help you rebuild what you had on here before, and we're going to help you make it even better. So like I remember 2007 with Team 771. We tied up their ramps. I think we took their ramps off and just played defense. And the next event, we spent a whole event working with them to get their ramps working, which they eventually did for the championship, which was like this cool. They didn't even have ramps. That's right. We told them to take a crappy arm that was powered by a servo off, and then we helped them build ramps afterwards to improve the robots. Like there's these partnerships that form, and when we talk about these more detailed partnerships that have happened, but there's been teams who. Cheesecake teams and like pulled their breakers and not told them that they pulled their breakers and stuff. Yeah, so like
it's just going too
far. There's a line that's being crossed there. So
I totally agree with you, Karthik. Like we have plenty of instances where we've worked with teams in the past and we've cheesecaked them, and usually there's always an education aspect that comes along with it at first. Teams want to understand why you want to put this thing on the robot or take this other thing off. And most teams that we've worked with, they're totally cool with it once you describe what's going on and what functionality you're trying to add, what strategy you're trying to implement. And then in a lot of cases, we've seen, that same cheesecake on the robot later on in the season, maybe at the off season or whatever, because they realized that they were now contributing to the Lions in, a more meaningful way. And now they're much more attractive for, eliminations or whatever. So for sure, there's tons of positive cases, and I think a lot of teams know that. But as Karthik said, there's so many instances of the one bad egg coming in and really pushing a team around, and I think that's everyone understands that's not how it should go down.
So I think a lot of people understand that, but it isn't what's being portrayed in a lot of cases, right? Because if it was, then we wouldn't be hearing about the negative feedback from this.
And I will say, I think the negative the non-consensual cheesecake is more common than we like to admit. I think there's a significant amount of teams who really push their way through, and that's where these hard feelings come from.
But if I can add in, though, the one thing with that is, the non-consensual thing, that happens in all aspects of strategy, right? That's all the time in regards to teams saying, hey, I want you to go play defense. And teams like, I really want to try to play a little bit. And we all know how that goes.
So, like, one thing that always strikes me when we've cheesecake teams, especially the championship, is the teams that have come to me and be like, wow, you guys are really cool about this. And they're stunned because they've been bullied before and they want nothing to do with it. And the same thing with strategy. I think there's a lot of, I talked about this in my presentation at the championship. I think there's a lot of tribe coaches out there who are they're cocky. They think their teams are better than they are. And they go around, they just go pushing and shoving teams around. And I think the best way to get three teams to work together is to start off the conversation with, hey, what do you want to do? As opposed to, hey, this is what we're doing. But that's we could do a whole show on that.
No, if I can add a side note, just to totally add on to that, though, I remember my junior year in high school when I was a human player and kind of the lead strategy person on it. I walked into a match when we were partnered with team number 45, and Annie Baker was the coach at the time. And back, that was a really big deal. 45 was a top tier team back then. It was very much like, hey, we're just going to listen to whatever they say. And the first thing he said to me is hey, what do you guys want to do? And then let's establish a good strategy based off of that. And just as a side anecdote, like that meant a world to me, to something like that. And I think about that, when I was active on a team and looking at how other teams want to be treated, that sort of thing. And it's so important to handle that in that tactful, professional manner, because you're going to get, it's like that saying, right? You get more bees with honey than vinegar. I think that's the saying.
Well, if you think back to that IRI when we played together with 43-34, the reason we won that, we were not the best alliance in terms of the three robots.
Sure.
We weren't. Yeah. We won that alliance because we played really smart, really sound strategy, and that's because all the drive coaches involved there and all the strategists involved just made things work and were really respectful and took ideas from each other. And like, we could still be aggressive, like when someone messed up, and be like, no, this has to improve, this needs to change.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it just works well.
Everybody had buy-in, right?
When you have one coach or one team that's just barking and everyone, people check out, man. Like, not all high school students in this program are as hardcore as, you know, the most hardcore. So if you start barking at a kid who's, you know, 75% into this, they'll check out and they don't really care if they win or lose.
Yeah, exactly.
On the flip side, if you make them feel valued, you make her feel like she's an important member of that drive team, she's going to do whatever she can to try and win. And so, you know, it goes that way with Cheesecake. When you have a team that has buy-in to the Cheesecake, man, it's an awesome feeling seeing these teams come together and the work that's the pride in the robots.
Yeah, I mean, that some of the best moments we have definitely is, you know, going all the way to the end. I remember specifically 2014, we went up to Pine Tree, and it was our fourth event, I think. So we had brought an all-girls drive team up there. They had practiced on the robot, but it was their first competition. We had done really well leading up to that. We had won the prior 2 weeks in a row, and we went in there and they were getting the hang of things. And we worked with a team 663 out of Maine, and just working together and getting them to hop along with us, go for the ride, understand the strategy we were trying to implement. I still look back at that, and they were it was such an awesome moment. They got to the end. We won the event. It was their first win, I believe, and it was just so much fun for us. We had our own backup drive team in there. For them, they had their first team real success on the field, and they bought into that strategy. But you got to come at it with a how can we contribute type of mindset. If everyone's coming in there like that, you definitely will come away with a positive experience, even if you don't win the event. If you come in, like Karthik's saying, barking, and one team expecting everyone else to just obey them, it's just not gonna end well.
Ding ding, you are correct, sir. That's how I heard it. Hey, before we circle back, and we're going to continue, I believe we're at 2012, so we'll have a couple things to go with that. But before we get into the modern era Cheesecake, let's take a short break to let you know that AndyMark is here for your team with parts, supplies, and resources. And now in stock is the 9-inch tempered steel compression spring. So this is similar to the 2017 official game piece spring, but at literally a fraction of the price. The spring is slightly stiffer than the McMaster car spring, but AndyMark has committed to providing this at a fantastic price of only $3 American compared to 36-inch of stock at McMaster car, which is $11.96. So those are in stock now. They wanted to let all teams know about that. It's obviously not something they're going to be getting a ton of revenue on, but they just want to make it available for everybody to be able to get right into their area. So make sure you go check that out at AndyMark. And if you haven't checked Cheap Delphi today, there's also a contest going on at AndyMark right now, which is called the G4RO3 Awareness Contest. AndyMark is giving away a $250 AndyMark gift certificate for the entry that most creatively raises awareness for the G04 sizing rule, which includes bumpers being included in the sizing of the robot. So this is due February 1st. Go get yourself a $250 AndyMark gift certificate at andymark.com. And you can do this by heading over to andymark.com. You can check it out on Cheap Delphi. And if you don't, forget to make sure you look at their deal of the day as well. It changes every single day with different deals that they have. And a huge thank you to AndyMark for making First Updates Now content happen. And AndyMark would like to wish all teams a successful 2017 season. So we're back here with Brando from FRC 125 Nutrons, talking the history of Cheesecake. We're getting right into the modern era. So we're at 2012 right now, guys. Anything to wrap up on the year 2012?
So one thing, this was one of my favorites, was so 11-14, we designed our robot around Cheesecake that year, in that our intake was a drop-down intake, and it had, was also used for manipulating the bridge, but it also had hooks on it. So if a team had their bumpers at the right height, we would be able to drag them up the bridge, and we'd be able to hold them to help with balancing and to turn the two robots into one unit to pivot the center of gravity and make it easier to balance. And so the Waterloo Regional that year, there was a team who came to the event, and I remember, so they had their kit bot there, and one of our mentors was looking at another mentor. He's like, "You notice anything wrong with that?" He's like, "No, what's wrong with it?" It's like, dude, it's a 36 by 36 kit bot. They built the full size. They didn't realize you had to cut a size.
Oh, geez.
And so this team was like, they needed help. And so like our kids are like hacksawing and whatever. And so then we were talking to them. They're like, where should we put our bumpers? We're like, well, if you put our bumpers at this height, our robot would be able to grab it. He's like, oh, you would never pick us. We were probably not going to be able to do anything. We're building our robot right now. It's like, and so.
But they had to be a rookie team too, I'm assuming, right?
They were a rookie team.
Of course, yes.
And I forget if 2056 was the number one seed or if we were the number one seed at that event. And we picked each other. And with the second pick, we picked that team. And we basically just asked them, hey guys, all you need to do is to drive into the corner and sit right there, and we'll handle the rest. And they would drive and just kind of park out of the way, and then us in 2056 would take our shots, and then we'd go grab them and pull them up the bridge. And it was that was like the bumper height cheesecake that year.
Oh, that's awesome. I definitely towards the end of the year, after some of the teams unveiled their scorpion tails for triple balancing, I saw some cheesecake, especially in the off season. I remember at IRI some teams dropping cylinders on their robot to help get the triple at the end of the match.
So I think that brings us to like the modern era of cheesecake.
Yeah.
Like what was going forward. And 2013 I think is where it begins, because that was the year where if you were facing a full court shooter, a high full court shooter, you really couldn't stop them. Once they got to their spot, they were just going to whale off 30, 40 frisbees and make 75% of them. And if you're playing a team like 2169 King Tech or 148,
that's exactly what I was thinking about. Yep.
You're toast. You're done. And so in the elimination rounds, if you were playing a full court shooter, you basically, I think the Poofs were one of the first teams to do this. They had pool noodles and dowel already, and they attached it to their third robot and said, you park in front of them, get as high as you can, and just adjust as many shots as possible. Even if you don't block a shot, forcing them to adjust a little bit could totally, because
waste a lot of time.
Yeah. Once they were dialed in, and they just they didn't move. But if you took more time to get dialed in there, so like that was the crazy one. And then 118 came to champs with the coolest cheesecake I've ever seen that year, because a lot of teams were using the dowel and pool noodle. They had a fan hooked up to a motor hooked up to a fan. And a bag, like a giant condom, basically. And they would turn this motor on, this fan would spin, and it would inflate this giant airbag to block shots. And we didn't get to use it because we got knocked out by a great alliance before we had ever played a full court shooter. But like that 118 had this whole thing. It was amazing. And like the inspectors didn't know it was legal, and the scales were packed away. And then the team had like 5 pounds of weight to work with, but Al held it. He's like, this definitely weighs more than 5 pounds in my opinion, so you can't use it. And I'm like, that's the most ridiculous thing I've heard in my life. Like, you can't just say that.
Hand scale.
Yeah, so we found Frank, and like Frank's like, no, that's not a thing. Let's find a scale. And then Frank's like, we can't find a scale. We'll give the benefit of the doubt or whatever. But that was another story. But that was 2013 where cheesecake became like people were doing it in qual matches. That's when the first year where it really became a thing in qual matches. Like, you're facing one of these full court shooters, you have to do it. Like, what else did you see in 2013, Brandon?
Yeah, like you're saying, I mean, that full court shooter really it changed the game a lot. If you were facing one, you had to account for it. You couldn't just go run in your corner and try to outscore them. I mean, obviously you could. Some alliances did try to do that, but especially in quals, if you were facing one, you had to account for them some way, especially one of these elite ones, like you said, like King Tech or 148, 1519, whoever. And I mean, we ended up cheesecaking ourselves. We built a sheet metal blocker. We had an elevator that year, and we ended up building this blocker that we would mount to ourselves just in the case that we played those teams. And when we got to IRI, I remember a match we played 67, and they locked in pretty quick, and we had to go into that match knowing we were going to use the blocker because we didn't have anybody else on our alliance that was tall enough or could even get tall enough in a reasonable time frame. So that was a big one. Strategy really dictated you having to change a configuration of a robot on your alliance if you wanted to slow them down. And Cheesecake really, that's the only way to do that.
I know one of the big issues that came up in 2013 was kind of the revising or revisiting of weight in regards to, there's a lot of teams that wanted to do Cheesecake, but because their robot already weighed like 119 pounds or something like that, it was total weight, right? So it wasn't what was on your robot; it was what could possibly be on your robot. So I know that was a big issue that came up a lot in 2013.
I know one thing that we always would do in 11-14 is we would take a picture on Thursday night of the whiteboard with all the inspection weights, so we would know which teams we could Cheesecake. It was for making your pick list. It's like, yeah, you guys are cut off and whatever. And then so going into 2014. You needed 3 robots who could possess a ball. And before championship, the possession rules were basically the ball had to flow through. Like after championship, they eventually at championship, there was a ruling made by a head referee that you could bounce it off a robot and that somehow constituted possession. But before that, and so like there were teams who were bringing like folding chairs and sticking them to robots, so you could put a ball in the folding chair and you could suck that out. Like,
well, I'm sure that wasn't brought there with the intention of doing that. It just happened to be the perfect thing to.
Well, I'm sure the first one was, but later on, teams like we freaking went to Home Hardware or Canadian Tire. We're looking for the right chair to scoop balls out of and everything. And so at the Windsor Regional that year, because we lost our first 2 events, and the biggest parts we could not do triple assist cycles. We were always on the number 1 alliance, and we just couldn't get a third robot that could get an assist. And we were like, we're done with this. That game was a game where you truly needed teamwork. And we're like, at these small events, it's the number 1 seed. You're not going to get a robot that's going to be able to do that assist. So we built an intake out of wood, like a very ghetto fab thing, Versaplanetary, hooked on there.
Like a 254 intake, or not even quite that quality?
Quality.
Yes,
quality,
yes.
Yeah, and we brought it to the regional, and we were like, okay, well, we gotta find a team to stick this on. So our scouts were literally looking at teams' upper appendages and the number of bolts that were on the upper appendages to see which team could pull it out fastest. And we talked to teams discreetly to see who was interested, and we found this team who was, and you see there 5428 with the wooden intake, and like that was the jazz.
Hat.
Yeah, that's the hat that we were playing against, and but that intake, like it was so like people forget that complicated Cheesecake, like when you're adding a motor and a Victor to a team, like this was the 4 Cheesecake, a lot of it's blockers, it's been passive. That level of Cheesecake is really, really hard to do, especially when you only have like an hour or hour 15 minutes to do it. And so like that was crazy, like having 11, 14, 20, 56, and 54, 28 all working on this robot, all trying to get it done. Like seeing Tyler Holtzman, like one of the best designers, and first soldering the motor, trying to get this in there. And like it was this crazy collection of stuff, but it ended up being so cool. And for 54-28, they got to go to championship. It was a huge experience for that team. But that was really when Cheesecake went to the next level, where you motorized the Cheesecake. And then a championship team's
motorized Cheesecake, yes.
You're kind of touching on that, that scale. There's these levels of Cheesecake that we've seen. Pool noodles as a blocker, generally not that invasive, but as soon as you start going to motorized, as soon as you start digging into another team's software, trying to set autonomous and all that stuff, you're really moving up the chain. And the levels of integration there, and like you're saying, that an hour to pull that off. I think some people gloss over that fact, especially people who tend to be on the negative side of Cheesecake, that they're generally against it. They don't realize that that this stuff is actually pretty hard to do, especially to make it effective. And you could actually teach a lot in that short time frame. especially for a team that maybe didn't have a very effective mechanism, and you're trying to help them retrofit a robot with something that will help.
The other thing is, it's like with Cheesecake like that, there's weight limits of the withholding allowance of how much stuff you can bring in. So that one, we brought in the raw materials for it, and then we're building it as the event's going on. Like it's 11-14 will always have people like somewhere working on this side project, and teams are always like, what the Cheesecake? What are you doing there? And what was crazy at that regional, we were working on that intake. We also had another project we were working on, which was Cheesecake for ourselves for the championship, because it was the goalie stick, and there was no way we were going to be able to build that goalie stick at championship. We had to start it sooner. So our idea was bring the raw materials into our last event, build it as much of it as we can at the event, and then put it in the bag so that it doesn't count against your withholding allowance. And so that was going on, and teams didn't really know what was happening, and then they thought it was associated with this cheesecake, and there was because the stupid wooden intake there, everyone could see that, and that's not a secret. But that goalie stick, we were trying to keep it on the DL. And like we joke with 1241, it's like, dude, your pits were right beside ours and you didn't notice us building this. But like at championship that year, like that, there's not as big of a need typically for this type of cheesecake at the championship because teams are more competent. Like your 24th team can typically do something, but we'll talk about 2015 where that all went to.
Didn't buy into that one in 2015
when Cheesecake just exploded. And the Pandora's box was open, and I don't know if it's ever going to be shut. But at champs that year, there was some of this going on. There were some attempts at goalie sticks Cheesecake, which didn't really work out that well. But 2014 was when motorized cheesecakes really started.
Yeah, in 2015, I mean, I think we should just get into that, right?
Yeah,
let's do it.
2015, I mean, like, we already kind of touched on motorized cheesecake and how hard that is. You get to 2015, and clearly we're talking about can grabbers as one of the big points towards the end of the season. But
before we get to can grabbers, let's talk about ramps, because can grabbers is like the ramp was like the most hilarious piece of cheesecake. So it started off 11-14 U-148 had a tether bot. They told us, we saw this thing, we're like, oh, that's crazy. And we're like, we're not doing that, And then when they released their video, it's like, wow, they're really, really, really good. And so one of the things that we had struggled with, like we just figured, okay, we're going to do landfill. We're going to ignore the human player shoot. But then we realized at a certain point, oh, shoot, we can finish the landfill. What are we going to do after we finish the landfill? And we sucked at picking up the human player shoot. It just didn't work. And so then we figured out that if you put like an upside down tote in front of there, the totes would slide in a little bit nicely. But then we started thinking, like, what if we just tethered a ramp? And so we built this thing, and it didn't really slide down that well. But then someone got the idea of adding bearings to the ramp, and then all of a sudden it was like a grocery store when they just slide the groceries across. We're like, holy crap! They just come up, and then the first time we picked up off a ramp which had the bearings on it, we could get 6 totes into our rope. The stack was like, it was crazy how fast we could do this. And we're like, whoa. So then we wanted to self-tether, except we didn't have the weight. It just, that robot in 2015, there was just no weight for that or whatever. So we're like, okay, let's bring the ramp to the event. And if someone's light enough, we'll attach. We'll do this. And, we get there and we realize we're going to finish the landfill, and we need more totes. So we build this ramp, and we took it to the practice field, and teams saw us picking up off of it. They're like, whoa, that is crazy. That all these teams are like, hey, can we attach that ramp to our robot? And like, there was this jockeying that went on. And so, eventually we found Waldo, we picked them. They were all about the cheesecake. We tied the ramp with a piece of string to them, and they didn't move. They were cool with it. And, we picked up off of it. So we go to Waterloo, and 2056 is like, wait a second, we've got like a similar intake to 11-14. A ramp would help us too. And so then now suddenly at the regional, there's lots of these ramps popping up. And there's teams like starting the event. First they say, hey, we're ready to be your ramp. We'll do whatever it takes to be your ramp. And we're like, whoa, this is getting a little weird here.
We be your ramp.
And then teams were like asking to borrow our ramp for qualification matches. Team Dave had a ramp that was being passed around, and like ramps were getting re-inspected with different team numbers. And like we printed team numbers for teams that we could pick. So we have team numbers for the ramps ready.
Had to label them.
It was just like this. The ramp thing became this crazy. Like we would chant ramp, 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 ramp from the stands, and like it was bizarre, this form of Cheesecake. But realistically, that game was so hard that some team, a ramp with just some bearings on it was more useful than most teams at this game. And it was just like this weird thing, and it was bizarre. But that brings us to,
Yeah, the main event, I guess.
Yeah.
I mean, and I think all of us saw it coming, everyone who saw the game and, spent 3 minutes analyzing realized that at the end of the year, this game is going to come down to the first 100 milliseconds of the match. We all saw it. We all figured it out. And I think everybody kind of nervously was looking around at the other events like, okay, it's not a thing yet. It's not a thing. And then we get towards, week 6, and then the district championships happen. And everyone, I just felt it. Like everyone knew it was on. Like this can race was 100% real, and teams were starting to throw around numbers of how fast they're grabbing cans and everything, and it became a really scary proposition. And I remember, especially here's a solid video. We have us doing our can thing. We were in Hopper Division finals, I think. It was maybe it was semifinals. We were playing the 987 Wave Alliance, and they had cheesecaked. Man, I forget.
25-12 with Easter levels.
25-12. There you go. Thanks. They had cheesecaked them. So we had like a 987 can grabber, which was already world class. Against or with them was 25-12, who had the duplicate of the 987 can grabber.
It was just a fraction slower, though. There was a little bit of a difference.
Okay, a little bit slower. And we had our can grabs, which were pretty good with the tennis balls. And that alliance, I think the reason that they got through, and obviously and beyond, was the fact that they had 4 lightning fast can grabs. I think we were the only alliance that was able to secure our 2 cans each match and get our 5. And that's what pushed us to the finals, especially in semifinals, where they had taken 4 cans or 3 cans a few times, and it really just handicapped the other team. So, and then you looked around and you saw what was going on with the cheesecaking. And I'm going to let Karthik do his whole thing because he's got the best story for that. But just from my perspective, where I looked around, you look at like 254. I think that was the biggest shock for everyone going into or coming out of Saturday at championship. And 254 had spent a huge amount of time cheesecaking their partner in ahead of quarterfinals. I think their partner was Crash 900, or sorry, 999. And they came out, and obviously a lot of mistakes happened in those matches, but you could argue that just the effort spent cheesecaking 900, or sorry, I keep saying 900 because that's where we're going, 999, kind of cost them. They didn't have enough time to really focus and get the stuff done that they needed to, and they ended up getting knocked out early in quarterfinals. So, I'm gonna let Karthik do his thing on cheesecaking, because 11-14 basically broke the mold on cheesecaking. At that point.
Well, kind of, because the robot itself we didn't actually see play, so that's an interesting thing to go with it. But as they went through, just to kind of wrap up Karthik here, is what led up to that with dealing with the robot inspectors and all that stuff that came up to that. So yeah, man, Karthik, take it away, man. Tell us all about this ridiculous harpoon robot here.
So I guess it starts during build season, we were just, we were having these conversations about what it's going to take to have the fastest can grabbers and whatever. And I just made an offhand joke. I'm like, well, the fastest way to get to it is shoot things, And we thought about it, but we didn't really. And we went through our first 2 regionals, and our robot was very good that year. I think, up there with our 2008 robot in terms of like we were just stacking faster than anyone, and we realized like we knew how important the can grabbers were. We all season long we're saying this game's all about the cans. It's all about the cans. It's all about the cans. But then it's like it really is, and we're like, man, unless we get faster can grabbers, we're not winning champs. It was as simple as that, and we went in parallel paths where we're going to keep making our faster, but then two of our college mentors, who we called the R&D team, Michael Scupian and Alex Rodriguez. Alex, who was the drive coach for 4334, a D-plus winner there and everything, came up with this idea of these harpoons, and I was just like, sure, dude, you guys, you go and do your thing in the corner, And then one weekend, like they sent video, I'm like, oh my God, like this is actually a thing. This could possibly be a thing. And so the basic setup of it was like you bring these 4 tripods onto the field, and they've each got a harpoon, and they shoot out into the cans, and then they lock into the cans, and then they pull them back. But what people never really saw was once the cans pull back, then all the tripods winch together into this one giant mass of garbage, and then the robot will drive
showing right now,
to the wall where it will get all this stuff out of the way. And suddenly because a lot of people were like, oh, that's just going to clog up the landfill. It's like, no, it's going to it's not going to clog up the landfill. And I mean, I don't want to, like, realistically, we needed one more day at 1114's home shop probably to have had something that would have worked. And I'll talk more about that. But so we get the champs, and these guys are telling me, they keep saying, 35 pounds is the word that gets keep tossing around. So I'm interviewing teams of potential cheesecakes. Like, yeah, you just need to get 35 pounds off your robot, whatever. And then like halfway during Friday, we realized there's been a terrible miscommunication. And the 35 pounds meant, no, the robot that we're going to put this onto has to get down to 35 pounds. And I'm like, dude, like that's insane. No one's going to possibly do that. Except our pits were right across from Team 900. And 900 is like they're insane. They're just like crazy, crazy people in like a good way, where they will do whatever it takes to win. And they just kept asking us, hey, what are you working on over there? What are you working on over there? And I was just like, I didn't even want to talk to them. I'm just like, go, whatever. And they figured out what we were doing. They're like, hey, we know what you're doing. We want to be attached to that. So like, we're going to go build a new robot. And I'm like, hey guys, we can't promise you anything. Like, we're not promising you a thing. If you want to go do this, go do this. And so they started that night building. Then they started exchanging like text messages with us overnight. We sent them CAD files and whatever. And so when 900 was available and we picked them, they just went to work and they just started building. And then it was like just absolutely crazy. Also, the whole weekend long, 11-14, like Alex and Scoopy and the kids who were assigned to this are all trying to get this stuff ready. Because again, we brought most of this in as raw materials because you only have the 30 pounds of the withholding allowance. So most of it was being built on site. It was COTS parts that were being put together and everything. And so it was just like this crazy whole thing. And then the rumors went around, and like we started talking to Ed Sparks, the LRI for our division, to give him a heads up on this. And Ed was, hey, Ed, this is what we're going to be doing. We want to get you involved. And then we started showing Al, and like Al was involved. And like I get a text message from Frank. He's like, hey, I hear you have this thing. I'll come to your pits on Saturday morning. And so like the LRI, some of them, some were really, really cool, and then others were not. I shouldn't say LRIs because some of them were robot inspectors. But Frank just came and saw it and looked at it. He goes, this is so cool. He goes, and we said, hey, Frank, we have these safety latches, this safety latch. He goes, that's great. This is, and Al's like, well, what about, and Frank's like, oh, this is legal. And so it's like, okay, let's do this thing, and then, after, as eliminations going on, like 900 doesn't even make it out to see any matches. We're still working in the pits. And we finally get out there for Einstein, and we have to make a decision because we're comfortable playing 1923 with the can grabbers they got from 148, and we're doing well. We're rolling, we're putting up the scores. And then we go into so our can grabber got ripped off in finals match 2 against Wave, and so we put up a really low score that match because the can grabber got stuck in our wheel.
Yeah, semifinals match 2, yeah.
Semifinals match 2, and so our second semifinal match 4, probably 3 or 4. So going into match 6, we knew we needed to beat 118 not be beat by more than 25 points or something like that. And so everyone's like, are we going to deploy the harpoons? And I was just like, they're not ready. And they weren't ready. So we went conventional, and, everything that happened. We got back to the pit, we lost, and then it's like, okay, there's a lot of people who wanted to see this thing. There's a crowd in the pit. It's like, let's try it. And we tried it. Only one of the 4 launched. It just wasn't quite there. It was too complicated, man, to get done in that time period. But maybe with a few more hours we could have done it. But I remember the mind games of the harpoons, where even though I knew we weren't going to use them and we knew they weren't ready, we had them keep setting them up on the side of the field just so other teams would think, oh man, the harpoons are coming in, and it was the atmosphere around there was so crazy, and I would have loved to have brought those on the field.
It wasn't just the troops on the field; it was the entire stadium. I mean, I was with my team. We were up in the stands. We had a pair of binoculars. We were just watching set these things up and take them down, and set them up and take them down, and we were just all losing our minds. We're like, are they seriously about to go drop these things on the field? This is nuts, So
one of the things, the reason we had them keep taking them down, putting them up, is part of the challenge was to get this robot set up in a timely fashion, whatever that means, so we don't get DQ'd. And so we had been practicing walking them out. Each drive team member takes one thing, and then getting the ropes tied and getting it all set up. And it was just, and then there was this fear of the harpoon, which just kind of kills me, because people were thought it was so dangerous. And it's we did the calculations. It put out way less energy than 1678's can grabbers. 1678's can grabbers going 1/3 the speed of sound and could have killed someone. There
was more dangerous carbon fibers.
We had a mentor on our team, Aaron Koszelski, who volunteered and said, hey, I will you guys shoot the harpoon at my chest.
I'll take a shot
to prove how safe it was. I'm like, Aaron, I support you being shot in the chest with the harpoon. But I remember we had a whole folder on safety to make sure we could pass this through inspection. A lot of the complications with those harpoons were ridiculous redundancies we put in there so it wouldn't be fired, and just it was an ordeal. I feel bonded to life with Marshall and his crew from Team 900, because when you forget about Robot in 3 days, Robot in 7 hours, and those guys, and I think the craziest thing about, so Alex and Scoopy moved on from our team after that because they were going to the University of Waterloo at the time, but these two guys were just so smart and always thinking of stuff, and they lived together, and we swear they napped together. Their brains were just in sync. They that summer started working on a project to basically autonomously control a golf cart, and they did that as their design project at Waterloo. And then they got offers from VCs in Silicon Valley, which is where they are now. They're done school. They left Waterloo, and they have a startup that does autonomous vehicles with millions of dollars of funding. And it's crazy to see the amazing people we have in this program, and you let them run wild, what they can do and what they can come up with. And I think that's just the coolest success story. These guys are born in 94, 95, 95, and they are multimillionaires right now, working in California on startups that are trying to disrupt the world. And it's just the harpoons were the first part of that for them, which is kind of crazy to think about. I just think that's what's kind of cool about that's the stuff I love about this program, but on to Cheesecake,
Yeah, the can race, the 2015 can race. I mean, it forced everyone, right? It forced us all to really push the envelope like crazy. the harpoons weren't the only thing that didn't see the field. Like I remember Aaron Hill had some like vice grip harpoon thing that shot out to grab a handle. I don't think those ever saw the field, or maybe they did. But all those types of things, everyone was just trying to take 10 milliseconds off of their their can grab, which is just crazy. The arms race just forced everyone.
Well, and so in 2014, when we did the goalie stick that was fully operated by the Kinect, which again, Alex Rodriguez, the one who, that was his idea, that sort of thing. We did that at Champs, and we're like, dude, hopefully they make this illegal going forward. And they did. That you cannot control a robot, because we were basically driving our robot with like freaking hand signals. I was really, really hoping that all the Cheesecake at championships in 2015 would have caused them to crack down on Cheesecake, because here's the thing.
Did any other guys think they was just totally going to get banned after that?
I absolutely did.
Yeah.
Totally.
And I would love it if it did, because man, it just, not only do you have to build your own robot now, like you got to build Cheesecake, and like this build season, which 6 weeks, we know that's not a thing. 16 weeks, but like it's more stuff you have to do, and the pressure, and like, and I get it, like for the teams who really want to be in that top 1%. Like you have to do these things to compete, because if you don't, someone else is doing it. And like, I think there's coolness to Cheesecake, but I also think there's something to be said for like, let's have some rules here. And it's like, like make it to, what you build at the event, or you come with what you have, or
it's tough to put rules around. I think that's one of the hardest thing, right? Because it's like, if you come with raw material, and then maybe that's what it is. You come with raw material. A lot of people are doing that now and building Cheesecake that's effective. How do you rule that out?
I think the way is like, first his rule, like for example, how do you stop people from working on their robot after ship day? Well, you have an honor rule. You have a bag and an honor rule. And with Cheesecake, you could say teams are restricted to using parts that were built by them or in conjunction, something like that. Just make it an honor system thing. Because like, put it this way, you put that rule in there with the honor system, 11-14's never doing Cheesecake again. Sure, some skeezy ass team will, but like these rules kind of. But like,
let me ask a question here, and actually, Marshall emailed this in from 900 actually, because obviously with his team being so involved with that, he asked if first were to remove the bag requirement, does this potentially enable more cheesecaking, or will it get rid of cheesecaking if they get rid of the bag requirement? Is there any correlation between that?
I think it's just going to change the form of the cheesecake. Teams are just going to be self-cheesecaking. So teams will.
You could always go. It could get crazy. I mean, I could see teams, building in other teams' shops, right? Before you get to a competition, it could get skeezy where you hide that functionality that you built together with a gentleman's agreement and all that other stuff. I mean, people always jump to that. I don't know if that would actually happen, but
I mean, we could do a Candidly Speaking on what happens if Bag Day goes away, but like, because that's a whole topic. But I think a lot of times people are like, oh, well, robot copying is not going to be a thing. That's too hard. And like, hey guys, for the best teams in the world, there's not much that's too hard. And like in 2015, the Cheesy Poops had a robot that started that season. And they had a very different robot at the end of the season, and they took a lot of inspiration from our intakes, and then they suddenly had intakes like that. Like the best teams in the world, if you go open bag, the teams who still have the energy to work 16 weeks hard will take the best from everywhere. Like the Killer Bees in 2009, their robot that they showed up with at Champs was they duplicated what 67 had been doing, and like, most teams can't do that, and it's not going to affect most teams. And I really don't think this should be a part of the decision over bag or no bag, because no bag has a whole bunch of other benefits that affect 95% of the teams. But for the top 1%, man, going no bag, there's going to be robots are going to change through the season.
It could get crazy.
Yeah,
it will get crazy. Is what's going to happen.
It's definitely, yeah.
All right. Hey, we're starting to run a little bit short on time, so let's move on here. So we have a couple more years. 2016, is there anything you guys wanted to cover for 2016 in regards to Cheesecake?
I mean, we brought a Cheesecake hanger to Champs. Like, we weren't that great last year, so we probably should have just worked on our own robot. But like, we got knocked out in the quarters. But like, we brought a Cheesecake hanger to Champs. At Cheesecake blockers, Champs was almost decided by a Cheesecake blocker. 2056 Cheesecake to blocker onto 1405, and if it wasn't for weird tiebreakers and then a random penalty call, the 1405 wins championship based on that blocker that was Cheesecake.
Yeah.
So
the hangover deflector Cheesecake last year, I mean, it was the thing that kept me up at night all year, because our robot was pretty darn unblockable except for the overhang blocker, which was true for, I think, a lot of teams, even the super elite teams. And that's what kept me up at night. And I was not surprised to see 1405 just dominating on Einstein with that thing, because it was such a hard thing to design around, and a team that could build an effective Cheesecake that that did that. And there was teams that duplicated that type of spectrum all the way across, without the overhang, or with an overhang that didn't work or whatever. But it was pretty invasive. If you had a team that could drive that thing around, you could absolutely shut some teams down.
And
was 1405, was it able to move at all, or was it at a fixed angle?
I don't know for sure.
I think it was on a pneumatic, but I can't be sure. I think part of what frustrates people about Cheesecake is so you build, like Brando with 125, they build this kick-ass robot that they think about release point, all this stuff. It's shooting amazingly. And then a team with a blocker that they didn't even build can shut you down. And it's all within the rules and everything, but you can see why people get frustrated by it. And I think that's what really sets people off about Cheesecake. It's not the teams have upgraded their robot at the event. It's that's they didn't even build that. It's like the Mean Girls line. You don't even go here. It's like you're winning an event with something you didn't even build. And they don't see the teams work together to put it together or whatever, but at the end of the day, it's still someone else's ingenuity that's going on there. And I think people, and especially when it comes to alliance selection, when teams are wait a second, you'd rather pick a team that main skill is being able to take part of their robot off than pick my robot, which we've worked on for 16 weeks. And I can see why people get frustrated by that, and I can see why Cheesecake gets to be awkward, and there's, some angst about it. My opinion on Cheesecake is I don't like it, but I play by the rules that exist. So I'm going to do what I can do to win, as long as it's legal and it's ethical. And that's where I see Cheesecake fitting in. I don't necessarily have to like it. I think that FRC would be a better program. Cheesecake wasn't part of it, but
yeah,
you make the best. You make the best out of it.
You're going to use it because it's out there, right? Yeah, that's
there's been great stories, with 148 and 1923 working together on those can grabbers, and what it did for 1923. And you talk to Libby and Sereth and those guys about how it changed their team forever, and that's a positive side effect for Cheesecake. But the negative is, I remember there's this one team who didn't get picked in our division, and they could do 2 stacks consistently, and they were just blown away and disgusted that they didn't get picked, instead of teams who weren't able to stack got picked. And so
that's the unfortunate part. It's sometimes it's the blankest slate robot that ends up being the prime. I mean, it's the prime Cheesecake robot, and you want a reliable drivetrain. Mechanums probably aren't involved in that, and you end up picking a really, basically a kit bot, or something that's really straightforward, that has a blank slate that you can easily integrate to. I remember, 2015, everyone was looking for the robot with a flat top. Who's got the flat top? Teams won the championships making their robots flat on top on purpose, but knowing that a 987 or someone would show up with something that would make them very
2512's robot wasn't like that necessarily. It was just they were willing to put in the effort to get it to what that needed to be.
Well, no, and some cases, you had very good Cheesecake, Tyler, that I forget if it was you guys or 987's Cheesecake, that could go on a robot that could already stack, and that was the optimal sort of thing.
Those 987s, yeah.
Yeah, so they had a very, very compact Cheesecake, So, I mean, I guess all this weirdness comes into play because it's what are you picking based on? And I don't know. It can lead to some awkward situations, but I think I do have to say that the other way to get rid of Cheesecake is by game design. If you design a game where there's, you need 3 teams to do something of substance, not something that can just be slapped onto a robot like a can grabber that's used for half a second, or bouncing balls off of robots to overtake an intake that they built for the whole season, or instead of teams work all season long to create this perfect shooter, but then like a wall with a flappy can shut it down. If you design a game where those things aren't as big, then Cheesecake isn't as important.
So let's talk about that, because I think that's a great transition going into 2017. Is there areas that Cheesecake can be in play for Steamworks? Do you guys see anything that comes up for that?
100%. And so I'll jump on this one, since I'm not really on a team this year. I still
sure.
chilling with 11-14 and talking to them and stuff. But I think I can speak more freely on this one, on what I think I'm going to see. Cheesecake hangers are going to be a thing. It's just like 100%. Hanging is not that hard this year. And once a week 1 event happens, Brando, did you say you're competing week 1?
Yeah, we're week 1.
So perfect example. People are going to see, I don't even know what 125 is built, but I can guess. And people are going to see what 125 is built, and they're going to see that hanger, and they'll be like, oh, yeah, we can build that. And for the teams that don't, teams like 125 are going to have hangers that you can slap on. And it's going to be a simple, it's not simple because it's motorized Cheesecake, so there's the complexity of that and all that sort of thing. But it's a one mechanism sort of thing, which is going to be similar to the intakes in 2014 that you put on robots.
Yep.
And it's definitely going to be a thing. And then the other one is, like, Robot in 3 days showed the world that you can score gears with passive mechanisms with just like a freaking box, the gear box. And teams are going to slap those on robots. You got a little bit of room? Here. Gear just drops in here, drive, and then your human player, provided that they haven't dropped their handle, pulls it up.
Yeah, I mean, where we see it a lot, I mean, and this isn't to speak badly of district events, but we get pretty wide spectrums. You have teams that are super elite world-class robots, and then you go all the way down the other end of the spectrum, and you have teams that don't even make the field. They'll go 12 matches without even getting the robot onto the carpet. And if you go to some smaller events, 30 teams or something like that, that number 1 seed, number 2 seed area, you're getting a pretty small selection of teams you can choose from. And knowing what this game is this year, you got to be able to run gears. And even if that team attempts to run gears and drops them, half the time, or can't get them out of the robot half the time, you're going to be looking at that and saying, I think we need to have a backup plan ready. And if we have a team that can do nothing but drive around, we want them to be able to help us in some way.
Could you guys visualize potentially having a Cheesecake for, you mentioned if they only drive, what about a gear delivery system or anything like that? That's
what I was saying with like the gear pouch,
sure,
box or whatever. That's definitely gonna be a thing. The other thing is, this game is gonna get so defensive that we might not see as much of the harder Cheesecake. To just go with a simple one, or just add some weight down low and go smash the crap out of everyone.
Yep,
at the same time, right? If I'm cheesecaking that onto a team, I'm also adding a hanger, because that's 50 points there, man. You don't want to just let that go.
So I see the low hanging fruit for me, and where we're going, or my mind goes right away, is the gearbox thing you're describing. And, teams are going to nail that geometry. I have a group of kids downstairs right now who built like 30 different boxes that gears fall into, to find the perfect geometry where it all works. People are going to build those and have backups, even if it's not intended to be Cheesecake. It's going to be sitting right there, and just go, hey, I want to put this on you because it catches the gear and drops it on the peg pretty effectively.
So I can see that being a viable thing in qualifications. I have to admit, though, I don't necessarily see that being viable in elims, and here's why. Is a team that doesn't do anything or doesn't have the ability to get the gears, are you going to trust that team to have enough drive skill to deliver the amount of gears that you need, even with your own Cheesecake on it?
So that is a really, really good point, Tyler. I think a lot of teams underestimate how hard it is to get teams to use Cheesecake. So like the ramps were the perfect one because you didn't have to. You just have to not jam the chute door. If you could do that, you were set. I remember. So one of the things that we back in like early Cheesecake era, 2006, 2007, was like you pick a team in the elims and then you change their sprockets to speed them up. And we always talked about it. We finally did it once. It was a disaster. Like the team just could not drive the robot at the new speed. They just weren't ready for that. And so the gear thing will be difficult for some teams. I agree it will be difficult. However, if one extra gear delivered is the difference between 4 rotors and 3 rotors, that's 140 points. So
well, I totally agree, but if they're only going to be delivering 1 gear or 2 gears, is it worth them to spend all match doing that versus picking another robot that you might be more confident in just playing defense the whole time?
I would hope that if I'm picking, I'm definitely, the first thing on my Cheesecake list is the drivetrain. Like my Cheesecake list and the things that I'm looking for. The drivetrain. Yeah, the drivetrain and the drivetrain and the driver. You know, like if they have mechanums, they're just not getting picked for this. Like this is one of those things where there'll always be like some moron cheap. Oh, mechanums aren't that bad. No, mechanums are good. You don't understand how many teams, if you have mechanums on your robot, you're just not making it on the pick list. Period.
Especially this year.
Yeah, like
you can't push anyone.
You hear that, Nightcrawler?
Like it's just the thing. You're like, there are exceptions to the rule. I think 525 is a team that's done mechanums in the past and have been really good. But like for the most part, you're just, especially if you aren't that good at scoring, you're just not being picked. You're just it's just not going to be a thing. But yeah, the driver and the drivetrain. So if I'm picking a team to Cheesecake a gear thing on, they will already. We better know that they can play defense. So if the gears thing's not working, then just go play D.
But so Tyler, I totally agree with what you're saying. You know, it's definitely not a slam dunk strategy. You put this on and you see this huge gain in points scored. But I do think that 2 gear number is going to be a really interesting one because I think that's going to be a big crossover point for a lot of alliances.
I don't disagree with you. I'm just saying I think it's going to be more viable. That in particular is more viable in qualifications than what is potentially in elims.
How is it more viable in qualifications?
But you don't get a bonus in elims of 100 or 80 points more.
Oh, but you get an RP.
Yeah, but in quals, like you have less time to put it on the team and for them to practice. So I would think they would be even worse at driving it.
Sure, I'm not doubting that. I guess what I'm doubting is the what it's worth overall. So like to me in quals, it's more worth a robot to score 2 gears than what it is potentially in elims to have that robot score 3 gears.
So let me just phrase it this way then. Like say you build an alliance that you feel comfortable getting 10 gears with your first 2 robots. Then I know that's probably shooting high, but there will be alliances that can do that with two.
Yeah,
two
there
robots.
will be.
And you can get a 3rd robot, knowing that you're already a pretty effective alliance, and you get your 3rd robot to grab 2 gears. They spend all match dropping 2 gears onto the peg. No other alliance is probably going to match you at that competition. You could potentially open up like a triple balance type thing where your point scoring potential is just so high that you end up cleaning house.
Yeah, and you don't have to worry about defense or anything like that. Yeah.
Right.
But I will definitely agree. When you add Cheesecake to a team and like they have to do the fine sort of driving that you have to do for gear scoring, and like you're loading in an area you might not be able to see because of sight lines and stuff. Right. I forget where the 3rd seat is now, if they have a sight line to the loading area, but or not. Cheesecake is not, that sort of Cheesecake is not easy.
No, not at all. I mean, it usually never is. There are the exceptions like the ramps, the 2014 ramps I come back to, or the bounce back type of thing.
And also with more teams being in districts, you're playing at events with 40 teams, 35 teams, 30 teams, 25 teams. Ontario's got a couple 25-team events this year.
Yep.
Wow.
So that team you get, like, they're available with the 24th pick for a reason. And the reason is not because they're brilliant and they've demonstrated great driving and they have a great drivetrain. They're available because they suck. Like, let's just put it that way.
In bottom of the barrel, have an on the field yet type of robots are
you have the odd miracle where it's just this awesome team who tried an overly complicated design and nothing worked and then they're just available. But for the most part, it's a team that doesn't really care. And trying to train a driver to score these gears, tough.
Yeah, but it might be easier, and to play my own devil's advocate, that might be easier than trying to train them to play defense too, or proper defense, right?
Yep. Yeah, I agree, because now I say it's better this year because you can play a lot of defense without getting penalties in this game. Like there's some games where it's like you tell your defender, like last year, for example, your defenders had to be super careful with like a bunch of different regions on the field. This year, like they really only have to avoid the loading area, because the key's barely protected. Like that 5-second rule is crazy. So you can just kind of like, it's more like 2007 where, you could slam around like a howitzer and just ram into things.
Yep, just cause havoc.
Yep.
All right, guys, before we wrap up, we do want to take a couple of questions that we have from our chat room. So I'll ask you guys just to take like a minute or so to answer these, Max. But we'll start out with Mipo07 asked, how different are alliances at regionals/district events from championships with regards to the third and fourth robots from learning from more of the elite teams on the alliance?
Alliances at championship are complete, and district championship and championship are totally different than alliances you see at regionals and district events. They may try to play similar strategies, but the level at which those alliances at championship can play is just completely different. Even the fourth robots at championship are super effective robots capable of scoring in the high goal or 2 6 stacks, and they're very capable teams. So it's a big difference.
Especially the championship is predominantly qualify only now, and with the advent of districts, you're getting really good teams at the championship. Even though the championship's been watered down by letting more teams in, more divisions, now with 2 champs and all that sort of stuff, there's just no comparison. Like at regionals, like your third robot is not good. Like it's just not. You're getting the 24th best team sometimes out of a pool of 30, out of a 36. It's bottom third of the event. While at champs, we got team 20 with our third pick last year. 20 is like they win regionals consistently. Like in New York and in that area. Like 20 is like an IRI quality team as our third robot. Like that's kind of 2014, 11-14, 16-78. We got 16-40. This is a team that shows up on Einstein. They're one of the top teams in MAR as a second.
That's who we got as our pick this year too.
Yeah, so look at the number 7 alliance on frickin' Newton last year. Thunder Chickens, Code Orange, and then they get 46-78, who was just they could do the Sally Port and autonomous. Like they were phenomenal. So just not different worlds.
Yeah. All right. Mega Flygun 14 asked, what do you see a Steamworks Elims alliance looking like in regards to the composition of the alliance? So if you were to kind of look at shooters and gear cyclers and robots playing defense, just give a brief description. And I know it can be different from time to time, but what do you kind of see generally for a composition for an alliance, a winning alliance?
So I don't think there's going to be a general composition like there has been in past years, but I think the combination is going to be the combination. And the combination is, the capability of doing 12 gears between the 3 robots for the at least top 2 or 3 to 4 alliances in the division. I think maybe less. Still having a hard time figuring that one out. And while doing that, still be able to get a decent amount of fuel in the goal, definitely to get it to 40 kPa. I think those are things that are just happening at champs. How that's going to break down, I don't know. And again, I'm probably not the right person to ask. I have not been in a shop this year to see prototypes, to see what's happening and what teams are fully capable of. I've seen some videos here, some 11-14, I've seen some of their stuff, but I don't have a good idea. But I think
let's ask a man who has been in the shop then, Brando. How do you visualize that?
So I think one of the most dramatic things, I think a lot of people have worked through this and figured it out already. One of the most dramatic differences in games between quals and elims is Steamworks. And I think, especially the top seeded alliances, you're going to have a team that is trying to score, 40 balls in auto, get that ranking point. And if they're successful in doing that, they're going to end up seeding near the top. And when they get to eliminations, they may run that same autonomous, but their strategy is probably going to shift away from running gears or getting that 6 gear number and moving on to running gears flat out. And so it's definitely going to be a lot of gear oriented robots. Autonomous will be very interesting because those teams that are able to score a lot of high goals or even a ton of low goals will be at the top of the rankings, and they'll have their choice of what the alliance looks like. And that 40 KPA, I think, may end up being the difference maker for a lot of teams. I think some teams, if they go flat out 12 gears, they'll be able to get it, but everyone's going to be gunning for that in elims, and the difference maker may end up being fuel, even though it seems fairly insignificant at times.
I think, and I mean, again, maybe I'm not the most knowledgeable on this, but I'm looking forward to seeing that robot that can combine fuel and gear cycles.
Yeah.
Find out what
it will happen at a high level, champs. It's going to happen, right? I mean, we know that it's gonna be the KPA will be reached in a decent amount of time. There's going to be a combination of where robots get as much KPA as they can in autonomous. There's going to be teams that do it in autonomous, right? They're going to get the full amount of KPA potentially in autonomous, or alliances that do that, and then it's just going to be a going back and forth between gears and scoring balls, and whatever is going to score the most amount of points. I think that's the cycle right there, is going back and forth and figuring at a high level is figuring out where that meshes, and how much you score in autonomous dictates the rest of the game.
And the other thing is there's going to be those robots who are cycling gears and just using their intake to pick up balls along the way and just filling up. And then once they realize they're full, that's when they go dump a load.
Yeah. Or they score or they shoot while scoring a gear.
That'll be so badass.
Yeah. That'd be sweet. All right, last question we're going to take here. Then we're going to close up shop here. Dodar 1592 asked, without cheesecaking has become a thing, how detrimental would it be for competitions? I think they might mean first in general, but for competitions to take back the 35-pound withholding rule?
So, is that just not have withholding anymore?
I love it. I'm all for getting rid of the withholding allowance. I just think that it would bring some sanity back. And
so teams can't bring in anything spares, no raw materials or anything?
Put it in the bag. I'd go back to the old rule where you could bring 1-for-1 replacements. So spares would be fine and raw materials are fine, but the withholding allowance, or shrink it. It doesn't need to be as big as it is. Where you can withhold your claw, your entire arm. I think it's gone a little too far. And
I think the better compromise is making it smaller. I do think that if you just got rid of it completely, this improvement you see teams have over a season, especially district events, you have to figure out how to deal with the withholding, or not the withholding, the unbag window for district teams and all that stuff gets kind of weird. But teams get better as the season goes along now. And I think that's been a consistent thing. I mean, it's always been true, but I see that overall competitiveness going on. And it's not just because teams are getting better at driving, it's because they're working on the robots and improving mechanisms. And I do think that when you get to that district championship level, and you see all these teams running flat out, it is pretty inspiring. So I would, as long as you don't lose that, I would try and reduce it. That'd be my...
So I think one of the things to think about is, and this goes back to the whole bag versus no bag argument, the reason people get so uptight about, because very much some teams will be like, hey, if you get rid of the bag, that means that I have to work for 16 weeks. And then someone inevitably on Chief will be like, no, it doesn't mean you run your team how you want to run your team. But what they really want to say is, I either have to work for 16 weeks or I have to lose. And I'd like to be able to work at the current levels I'm working at and not suck.
Yeah.
In comparison to the rest of the field.
Yeah.
And it goes to that same thing with the withholding allowance, where First has a problem with teachers burning out, mentors burning out, kids burning out, which I don't think we talk about enough. We have a problem with kids who spend so much time doing FRC that their grades are garbage and they get into garbage schools or don't get into schools. And so it's just that trade-off. Like, what's more important to the program? Like, because there's obviously something crazy cool about watching teams improve their robot over the season. And it's also really, really cool to have really good robots at the end of the season. It makes the program look better. But on the other hand, I don't know how bad the attrition really is. And because, like, you get a lot of these, like, statements you hear from a teacher's like, oh, I quit because of this. But, like, is that really why you quit or whatever? But it's a trade-off. Like, the withholding allowance definitely allows for more opportunities for iteration and better robots. But it also does mean you have to work a little bit more to compete. That at the 50 percentile level is being raised, and that can dissuade some from participating in the program or continuing to participate in the program.
I think that your statement too, Karthik, is it allows for better robots for higher tier teams in many cases. I don't know if some of those, there are some teams, I'm trying not to generalize too much, but with the withholding the way it is going to be typically those mid to higher tier teams that are taking the most advantage of having that, right? Teams that are a box on wheels or something like that, they have no use for a 35-pound withholding allowance. So in my opinion, all it does is it furthers the gap in many cases. And there is nothing there's nothing wrong with those with mid to high end teams iterating on the robot and using the rules the way they are. They're going to do that because that's allowed, and that they want to build competitive high end robots, right? But from a gap perspective, to me, that just widens the gap between low tier to high tier teams.
Yeah, it's doing it by keeping the ceiling lower. It's not doing it by bringing the floor up. So I think you got to push that aspect no matter what.
But but here's the thing: First keeps lowering their floor by trying to get more teams. Your floor is just becoming lower. Like, the amount of people who go out there, it's like, oh, start a FRC team. It doesn't matter if you have a shop, but these grant sustained teams out there. So it seems like if the goal is to make this program as big as possible, not my goal, but if that is first goal to make the program as big as possible, then you have to lower barriers to entry. You have to make things easier instead of, pushing that. So, like, you can't have it both ways. Like, First can't have it both ways, where they say, like, we want this program to be just everyone have a team, but you can't have all these teams be freaking wicked awesome. It's just not going to be a thing, and it's got to lower down. Like,
what you describe appears to be conflicting constraints, which I think is just, at the heart of so many debates inside of First is what you just described. So,
I mean, every team deals with conflicting constraints when designing their robot. That's where trade-offs have to be made. And when you're designing a program like the First Robotics competition, you have the same thing.
All right, great discussion today, everybody. That is going to be it for today's show, Fun Nation. Don't forget that you can follow Candidly Speaking and all of Fun Shows under First Updates Now. We do this for you. That's the honest truth. We do it because we want to get people inspired to get more out of First Robotics. And we've had a few people ask about donations and contributions and that sort of thing. And right now, the best way to help make this grow is just tell somebody about this. Tell a friend to come back and check us out at First Updates Now. Make a post or a tweet and tag us to say you like the show or post back to it. And don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube and to follow us here on Twitch at First Updates Now. We're going to be doing a lot more with Twitch coming soon that we'll be announcing in the next few weeks. So a lot of really cool stuff around the corner. I'm not trying to put that on a pedestal, but it is coming. But don't forget, you can also visit us at firstupdatesnow.com. If you got feedback for us, send it to feedback at firstupdatesnow.com. We also do have t-shirts available at our website at First Updates Now as well. Brando, thank you so much for coming on, man. Fantastic job. And thanks for all of your insights. What's going on with 125 and anything that you want to plug at all today?
Yeah, we've got a lot of stuff going on. Our team just went through our busiest 2 weeks of the year. I say that because we run our kickoff and our quick build here. We do the quick build a week after kickoff. So we've had like a dozen teams here for quick build, and we had 40 teams here for kickoff. So that our team's really busy with that side of things, as the first 2 weeks of the season roll through. But we're excited. A lot of prototypes, a lot of different mechanisms on these robots this year. It's going to make for a lot of, I think, really diverse robots, a lot of really bad robots, and a lot of really cool robots.
For sure. And Karthik, thank you once again. Great job hosting the show. Anything you want to plug or talk about today, or what's going on in your life, man?
The Leafs won 4-0 tonight, so that's pretty good.
There we go. And I would say I'd plug the Packers going to the Super Bowl, but that didn't happen.
Yeah, I'd plug the Cowboys going somewhere, but the Packers happened. So.
But the Packers happen. All right. Well, we'll be back with Candidly Speaking in January. I'm sorry, we're in January, in February, and stop back next week, Tuesday, for First Updates Now recap. You can check on our website and social media for all of our other fun shows we have going on behalf of myself, Karthik, Nik, and of course, Brando for being on the show. Thank you so much for tuning in. We want to thank our moderators in chat, doing a great job as always. Thank you to Twitch community for help spotlighting us, and we'll see you next time on First Updates Now. Talk to you then.
This has been a First Updates Now production. Visit us at firstupdatesnow.com or find us under First Updates Now on Facebook or Twitter.